is good.
Happy New Year to everybody. It is time for another edition of Captain's Quarters Podcast, the first one of 2023. And we have a special guest tonight, but let's do all the things we're supposed to do. The start is a toast to everybody watching us, hoping that we have plenty of people watching because we have some good news to tell you later. That's something I just found out about. So we'll be sharing it with you. So cheers to you, Gunfire, and Longwood. Cheers to you.
Cheers. Cheers, Captain.
And by the way, I opened a brand new bottle of Diplomatico tonight in honor of my guest tonight, who's not only a guest but a friend of mine, and I know he likes this rum, so this was opened in his honor. And we'll have another one of those toasts in just a few minutes. So, how do you find us? YouTube, Captain's Quarters Podcast. Put your cell phone up there, take a picture of that QR code. You can be right there watching us all the time. Well, some of our good news has something to do with YouTube. So there's a hint. Maybe I'll drop a few more as we go through. We'll see what happens. But go to YouTube. Put in Captain's Quarters Podcast, all one word, all lowercase letters, and you'll find all of our shows out there that you can watch. Davey, do they go back a certain time?
YouTube has them all.
Has them all. All right, very good. I guess when we reach the 5 or the 8 year mark, it'll be a little different, but we'll see what happens. We always like to pay our respects to fallen celebrities, and this week we have more than usual. And I have a question for you, because Davey put it together this week. I had so much going on. Is Pelé in there?
Yes.
Yeah, because I just heard a couple hours ago that Pelé passed on. So, Davey, let's see what you got. First off, Pope Benedict. He was the Pope for a while. From April 2005 to February 2013, and then elected to step down and retire for obvious reasons of his age, and it seemed to work in his favor, and everybody supported him. He was well loved, and I've heard all kinds of good things for the last day or two all about him. So we honor Pope Benedict the 16th. Also, Anna Maria Pointer. One of the Pointer sisters. Very good. I'm sorry she's passed on. They found their fame in 73 at pretty much the start of the disco era. She was only 74. Pope Benedict was 95. Who else do we have? Edson Arantes. You did this on purpose so I would have problems with the name.
You just
Di
say
Nascimento. He was a Brazilian footballer who played as a forward, otherwise known as... Is this Pelé?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess I would have never known his real name had Davey not tried to foul me up. Good on you, Davey. Very good. Barbara Walters passed on the 30th. An American journalist, an icon for women in the journalistic world. And she had quite a few great interviews with some fantastic people. And Dame Vivienne Isabel Westwood, an English fashion designer and businesswoman, largely responsible for bringing modern punk and new wave fashion into the mainstream. So she was 81, Barbara Walters was 93, and Pelé was 82. And of the three, I think Barbara Walters got the most ribbing from the Saturday Night Live crew. Pretty much. Aye. Very good. So, Davey, 8 bells. Good job, Mr. Longwood. Respect to those people that made a difference in our lives from their profession into our lives. How about quote of the week? David, do you have one? Mr. Longwood, what do we have? Although no one can go back and make a brand new start, anyone can start from now and make a brand new ending. Carl Bard. Oh, I like that. That's a very good one. That's a good quote, especially for the first of the year. And that's why you did it. See, they're very good. I'm starting to understand Mr. Longwood. And of course, now it's Question of the Week by Captain Mayhem. And New Year's resolutions. Do you make them? And more important, do you even keep them? Let's see what our listeners pop in on the comments during the rest of the show, and then we'll figure out where to go from there. It'll be well worth listening to. So, let's see. At this point right now, we have Crew Adventures. Oh, Davey's ahead of me on that. Crew Adventures, ladies and gentlemen. Pirates on the Edge is this Saturday coming up in Edgewater, Florida. The St. Augustine Swashbucklers, joined by the Seawolf Privateers of Palm Coast or Flagler County, will be joining us, bringing their ship and manning some of the games with us. They have become our sister crew, and it is a good matchup to have them and us. We'll be talking about a couple of other events of theirs in just a few moments.
Also the Sirens.
What's that?
The Sirens will be joining us.
Ah, you're absolutely right. Ancient City Sirens will be joining us too, and I should know better because I actually talked with Miss Gina today during some of our planning sessions. So, then of course, ladies and gentlemen, Old City Pirate Fest, January 27th, 28th, and 29th. The website has gone operational, and you should be able to do some of the things. I'll check it later tonight to see where it is, and then we'll start blasting it everywhere. That website, by the way, is called W Mayhem Productions, all lowercase letters, wmayhemproductions.com. That is the website. And right now, as it stands, the only thing that's on it is Old City Pirate Festival information. After Old City Pirate Fest, there will be a section for the crew, a section for the podcast, and a section for Captain William Mayhem. So, ladies and gentlemen, go to W Mayhem Productions. Mr. Longwood, I just noticed in the scrolling the W is missing.
Oh.
No worries. W Mayhem Productions, ladies and gentlemen, not Mayhem Productions, W Mayhem Productions. And keep up with us. That website is going to have some great pictures on it over the next 2 months. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, what else do we have before we go to our guest, Davey? Was there anything else?
Usually it's update after event, but we didn't have any event.
We didn't have any events, so we got to take a rest. And we hope that many of you enjoyed our reading of a pirate night before Christmas, which we put on as a recorded show for the 26th, the day after Christmas. From this point forward, though, it's time to bring in a guest. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've had the pleasure of working with this man. He is a character actor here in St. Augustine, emphasis on the character, but he has actually played John Stavely. Well, that's his real name. He's actually played Henry Flagler quite a few times all over the city and has become quite as popular. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. John Stavely to our show. Hi, and ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have one more shot to welcome our guest and friend here. John, let's see, you got applause already.
There we go.
That's very good. So cheers to you.
Cheers to you.
Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure.
Hi.
Thank you.
So, how long have you been in St. Augustine?
26 years.
26 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you've done tours,
Yes.
ghost tours, historical tours.
Absolutely.
You've done the gambit, actually. Didn't you even at one point in time have a tour company for a bit?
For a little while, I
Yeah.
did, as an independent and doing my own tours. But the characters are close to my heart. I like to bring history to life and make it not boring. I was bored as a child in school about history, and so it helps me to bring these characters to life.
And besides Flagler, You do Jesse Fish?
I do Jesse Fish, who actually lived in St. Augustine.
He did. Made some of his money off of the oranges, if I remember right.
He did. Sent them all the way to London.
Yes, and so oranges was something that they didn't have over there, so he was a groundbreaker. Are those the only two characters you've actually done?
Those are my most popular characters. I've
Right.
done a lot of other minor characters throughout the years, but I often do custom characters, so I'll have museums call me up and say, hey, can you do so-and-so, and I'll create that character for them.
So the best part about being a character actor is you still get to teach the history, but you get to teach it in your comfort zone.
Yes.
Which is important for tour guides. Some of them constantly forget. They don't need to just regurgitate everything. They need to be a part of it. Chad Light was on our show before, and he's played Pedro Menendez and Juan Ponce de Leon, and was pretty well popular as Pedro Menendez for a while.
Absolutely.
And when I first met Chad, one of the things that used to just aggravate the heck out of me was he'd never break character. He'd never drop voice. He was always, even if you were trying to talk to him and there was nobody around, he still kept his character. Now you keep your character also when you do
And that's what I'm known for as well.
Yes.
So it frustrates people sometimes, because a lot of times as Henry, I'm called upon to attend a cocktail party. And so for an hour, hour and a half, I become Henry. And they keep trying to get me to break my character. They want me to go into the modern era, and I won't do it.
Right.
And it frustrates people sometimes.
I mean, I try to keep my character as William Mayhem, especially when we're at the Pirate Museum, and very seldom do I drop the voice or the act, because it's what makes people, one, they notice,
Right.
and we're reenactors, and I've often said the word actor should be removed from that title for some people, but we actually really are actors.
Right.
But it does help also to know the history of the person you're doing something.
I think that's important. I think you need to have a deep understanding of whatever character you're doing, and then make it your own.
Right.
As all actors do.
And so, what was the most important thing that Henry Flagler did for St. Augustine? We're going to go to Florida too, but for St. Augustine, what do you think?
Oh my gosh. There's so many things. I mean, it's multi-layered, because Henry really opened up Florida, but he started in St. Augustine. And so he brought down not only the railroad, but he built some beautiful hotels here. He brought electricity for the first time, put in a hospital, a waterworks, really changed the whole landscape of St. Augustine in a very significant way.
So, Flagler College was the Ponce de Leon Hotel.
Yes.
And
His first hotel.
his first hotel, which is where he started putting electricity in.
Exactly.
And some of the tour
Before
guides,
the White House.
Before the White House.
Yes.
Really? See, I didn't know that. That's a good one.
Before the White House,
the
the
White House.
electricity here.
And we had he had many celebrity of their time, celebrity guests at his hotel.
Yes, he did.
Can you name a couple, as many as you want?
Oh gosh.
I know I put you on the spot.
There
with
were
that
presidents. There was Rockefeller. I mean, so many folks.
And speaking of Rockefeller, I knew that Henry Flagler, because I've never played the part, but I try to know a little bit more about other parts of history besides just pirating, because I have done a few things about St. Augustine, but I wasn't aware. I knew that Flagler started Standard Oil Company.
He was one of the people that
But
started,
he had
yes.
two partners.
Well,
Rockefeller
yeah.
was one, and I could probably look up real quick and tell you the other one, because I can't remember it all of a sudden.
So 1870, they started Standard Oil, and they saw the opportunity in petroleum.
Right. Which would then become the downfall of everybody arguing about the Green Deal or whatever. But yes, let's see. Rockefeller, Andrews, and Flagler partnered up, and then he ended up moving to New York City. But because of the climate of New York City, his wife at the time,
Yes.
because he was married 3 times.
Yes.
So his first wife,
Mary Harkness.
she got very ill,
She did.
and the doctor suggested that down here would be a better place for her.
And this became the benefit of St. Augustine, because she came to take the waters. The mineral waters were supposed to be very healthful. The warmer climate was supposed to help her, and that's why he came here.
And she, though, did die,
Eventually.
and he married 2 other women, Ida.
Well, Ida Alice was the nurse of his wife.
Yeah.
And so she had been with them for 3 years and taking care of his first wife. And then suddenly when she passed away, he turned his attention to her. And she was a bit younger, and she had fiery red hair, and was apparently quite an interesting person at parties. And so he decided that was the one.
Now, she's the one that had mental issues, too.
She ended up having mental issues, absolutely. He was struggling to try and keep a rein on her. She heard voices. She loved seances. She was very spiritual. But she also liked to drink laudanum. And laudanum caused her to think things that weren't happening were actually happening.
Another folk hero of character was Wyatt Earp, and his wife had the same issue.
Exactly the same thing.
Had the same problem, and caused her to be very distrustful, although he wasn't exactly a pillar of the community in some ways.
No, but you become a little delusional when you drink laudanum.
So it was, but Henry Flagler is, I mean, I'll tell you, you may have never heard this, but one of the things I ask almost every one of my school groups that comes through the museum, who's the one that came here to establish St. Augustine? Well, we know it's Pedro Menendez.
Yes.
But I get about 20% of school children that will say Henry Flagler.
Really?
Yes, they will. The only thing I tell them when they do that is, I will give you credit even though the answer's wrong, but the fact that you know one other major character of St. Augustine's history, it means that you do pay attention in class and your teachers are helping you out. So Flagler, though, his influence on St. Augustine was 1860s to
Well, he actually came down in the 1880s, 1883, with his wife.
Okay.
And then he returned, and so the 1880s for him were the establishment of all that he was trying to do. And he on the QT, started buying property. Dr. Anderson, his personal physician, was helping him buy property anonymously, and he was able to absorb a lot of things before he built the Ponce de Leon Hotel.
Now, is this the Dr. Anderson that supposedly was the owner of the house that is now Ann O'Malley's? Is that the same?
I don't know that. Yeah, that's interesting.
Well,
could have been.
It could have been.
Yeah,
I might have to look that one up. That's a great thing, ladies and gentlemen, about having other historians sit here in the chair with me, or even if we're not sitting on camera. It elicits all kinds of other questions like, I wonder if that's true or if that's not true, and then most good historians will take a few seconds and go figure it out.
Well, and that's the beauty of St. Augustine. We have wonderful research facilities here. We have
do.
Great opportunities. Plus, there are so many people that have studied this way beyond me that I can access and talk about, well, what do you think about this? And you're right. True historians will question history a bit, or question stories a bit, and find out what really hopefully happened.
And I mean, that's happened with me for the 12 years I've been doing the Pirate Museum. There's all kinds of things that, some of it is actual common sense that you can figure out, well, that really couldn't have happened, but maybe it happened this way. So Flagler helped build 2 churches or 3 churches in St. Augustine?
Well, he was involved in a lot of things, but the Memorial Presbyterian was, of course, his memorial to his wife, his first wife. And then he helped the other churches because he realized that in St. Augustine, the other churches needed to thrive because of all his guests coming from the north. So when there was a fire at the Catholic Church, he stepped in and helped them. When they were trying to build the church across town, he said, well, I'll give you some money to get going. I'll buy the property and you can build your other church. And so he really tried to have a diverse Christian influence in St. Augustine. And he felt that was going to help his guests from the north be more comfortable.
Well, I think it worked for him.
It did. It truly did.
Worked for him very well. And so he also brought the railroad to the entire state of Florida.
Yes.
And that's important because that's really the one thing that really truly did open up Florida to the rest of the world, was those railroads.
Absolutely. And the thing was, coming from the Northeast down here, they had different size rails, different gauges.
Right.
So to be able to come down here for him from New York City became a real ordeal. It took him 96 hours to get to Jacksonville the first time he tried to come by rail, because you had to switch cars, switch rails, reload your luggage, and it was an ordeal. And so he said, why don't we have the standard gauge all the way down? I'll talk to the owners and help them. And so we'll have the standard width of rail so that they can all come down easily. And that's one of his big accomplishments.
He also brought a medical facility into this town for his people.
He
for
did.
Everybody that worked for him or worked with him, probably for him more than anything else.
And it was something he was very proud of.
And he had a medical facility for all these people. So he really, truly is a major influence in the late 1800s on St. Augustine and how St. Augustine became a place for people all over the country to come here.
Absolutely. And much like Henry Ford, he created systems and standards that are still in place today.
So Henry Flagler, who also, we just talked about this beforehand, he had an influence in Miami, a
Yes.
huge influence.
Yes.
Because of the railroad system.
Right.
And so that and Miami back then in the late 1800s was just a little one-horse town. It wasn't anything.
It wasn't much.
Wasn't much at all. It was almost at the end of Florida, other than those islands out there called the Keys that people were camping on, and pirates were using them in that time frame.
Right.
So they want to name the town Flagler, and he doesn't want them to, and he suggests that they name it something else, and the name sticks, and it becomes Miami, Florida.
Exactly.
That's how influential he was on the state.
Well, and when he reached Ormond Beach, that was where the rail line actually ended. And so he said, we need to have railroads further south to really open up Florida. So he went to the Florida legislature and he said, look, at my own expense, I will create more rail line further south. This will benefit everybody. He said, but in return, for every mile of track that I lay, I want 8,000 acres on either side of the track. And they looked at him and he said, I'm spending my own money to build the rail line. It's going to cost me a great deal. So if you give me 8,000 acres on either side of the track, it will make it worth my while. And they agreed. So by the time he finished getting to Miami, he had over 2 million acres on either side of the tracks going down to Miami.
Wow.
And so he set up warehouses, he set up junctions, created cities, and so he truly opened up Florida for tourism.
And he also took railroads over towards Cedar Key.
He did.
He took, and that's the only one I know that went across the state. I don't know if he did any others across the state.
But he ran into Henry Plant over in the Tampa area, and so he said, well, I'll let Plant have the West Coast, I'll take the East Coast.
And that's how it just got divided.
It all
up.
kind of worked out.
Kind of worked out for him. So you see, Henry Flagler is a very interesting character, and to have the ability to play that character. You've done Henry Flagler at corporate events, parties. Give us one. Do you have a most memorable one?
Well, I did the 100th anniversary of Flagler County to the south of us. That was fun. I did the 125th anniversary of Flagler College. That was a lot of fun, too. In that one, we actually rode the Florida East Coast Railroad down to St. Augustine. And
From
then we
where?
hopped out
From Jacksonville?
from a little north of town.
Okay.
And we came in on the railroad, and then we hopped on a buggy with the mayor, Joe Bowles at the time. And we rode into Flagler College, and it became a really memorable experience.
Very cool. If you're like half as much as doing your characters as I do with doing Captain Mayhem, then it's a blessing to be able to do it. Now, because you're doing that, that's not just the only thing you do that keeps you involved in tourism here in St. Augustine. You're actually the director of educational tours at both the St. Augustine Pirate and Treasure Museum and the Colonial Experience.
I am. And I've been past president of the St. Augustine's Attractions Association. We're very involved in the community because I think it's important. So when you like the history, you love the history, you become part of the community and you help them as much as you can.
And you can never ever say in public, man, I just don't like tourists.
No, because that's our bread and butter,
It is.
and it's like it's just
Sometimes the tourists will get on your nerves,
They may.
but they give me a lot of things to laugh about too. Because I mean, one of the things, and this is primarily more from talking pirate history, but
Right.
most people that come here from one of the other 49 states have no clue that St. Augustine was here for over 100 years before the British started building colonies.
No, and when I tell them we're 42 years before Jamestown and 55 years before the Pilgrims, they're like, what?
Yeah, because everything is that history.
Right.
So, tell us, in a way, what got you started doing Henry Flagler?
Well, for me, it really started before that. I was involved with a couple of attractions and tour companies, and they wanted to start creating these characters for corporate groups primarily.
Right.
And so my original character was Jesse Fish. So during colonial times, the British were here. Jesse was a raconteur. There's no other way to describe it. He was the silver-tongued devil. And so he came here, he had been coming here since he was 10 years old with the Watson Company out of Boston. And he knew Spanish, he knew the British very well because his family moved from England here to New York. And so he saw an opportunity in St. Augustine when there was a switchover in 1763. So when the British took over in 1763, he went to the Spanish and said, hey, you know me, I've been here a long time, and so I'm going to help you out. I'm going to help you be successful once you leave by holding your houses. I'll rent them out. I'll give you the money when you get back, because it won't be very long before you come back. I'll take care of everything, and you don't need to worry about a single thing. And so, of course, he broke that trust and sold a lot of the properties and blamed it on his nephew and went before the King of Spain, who said, okay, I believe him. It wasn't his fault. It was his nephew, who they couldn't find.
And he got away with it.
And he got away with it. And so that was my first character because I found him extremely intriguing. And then more people were coming and saying, well, we need to do other characters from St. Augustine. Pedro Menendez, Ponce de Leon, Henry Flagler, all these influential people needed to be represented. And so over the last decade or so, we've really tried to represent them as best we could.
And you named 4 of them.
Yeah.
Menendez and Fish. Now Menendez was Spanish. Fish was British with Spanish knowledge. Flagler was American. Yorker, yeah.
He was American.
So the way you portrayed or the way you got ready to do everything, how much research did you do to really work on Henry Flagler's character?
Well, I did a tremendous amount of research because I think almost like a jazz blues player, you have to learn the basic. Here's the thing, and then I can riff off of that. And so I had to learn Henry's history in order to riff on it. And I decided to do a version of Henry, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
So I didn't want to play him straight as, here's what everybody says in all the history books, here are his letters, here's what people say. I wanted to create a version of him as not necessarily the robber baron, but a man of his age. And a man of his age that was extremely wealthy.
And competent.
And what would he do and say during those times? And so I created a version of Henry, not just a straight, here's what they say in the history books.
Well, I often say this when I talk to people about history. Prior to the invention of photographic equipment and or recording devices, certain things, nuances about characters and people in the past, we don't know for sure.
No.
You can't tell that from a piece of paper that's written there, and maybe it's a speech that he gives.
Right.
But you don't know his nuances of his speech. You don't know the way he would emphasize things. And so the characters that we do create are a version of the characters, because if we actually went back in time to the 1880s, which would be...
We'd be surprised.
We'd be terribly surprised. It's 140 some years now.
Yes.
And the change, just the vernacular and the way people talk, if you thought talking now was understandable and you went back and tried to talk the same way, the people would not understand everything you were talking about.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is a movie about that. It's a science fiction movie, and I never remember the name of it. But these college students think they are very versed on French history and can speak the French and everything else. And another college professor has invented a time machine, and they go back in time, and they're promptly arrested for being spies because they don't speak French. They speak French modern. They don't speak French of the 16 or 1700s.
The good old days.
So things like that would change greatly. So here's one I want to ask about, because it's always been a rumor, and I've never really checked to see, and maybe you can tell me. But there are stories that Henry Flagler wanted to put a golf course in St. Augustine where the fort is. Is that true?
He actually built a few holes around the golf course. Around the fort. Yeah, a golf course around the fort. And people would play. You can get pictures of it. There are actually photos of it. And he wanted to tear down the fort and build a hotel.
Ah.
So that was his goal. He was going to say, well, we'll build this beautiful hotel where this is and put a little golf course around it. But the citizens of our town said no. No. We don't want to tear down the fort.
Well.
And so that's when he started going further south.
Very cool. So doing tours, most of the tours that you do when you're doing tours with over the Colonial Quarter, when you have to step in, or at the Pirate Museum, do you, I'm going to ask this and it'll be loaded, I'm sure. How do you, for the most part, do you enjoy working with children?
Yes, because they're curious. They're raw, if that makes any sense. They're sort of blank slates. And so they have some ideas, they've heard some things, but they're not really sure. And so that unsureness gives me an opportunity and an avenue to talk about certain things. And so it's fun for me because I was the kid that was bored of history in school. I hated history until 10th grade. And in 10th grade, I had a wonderful teacher named Colonel Barrett, and he would talk about world history by putting up the flag of the nation, playing their anthem, put a fan on it so the flag was blowing, and talk about Bismarck, blood and iron in the Balkans. And it brought history to life for me. And that's when I realized history didn't need to be just dates and names. It could be people. And one of the things I love with the student groups is that you find out that Juan Ponce de Leon was on Christopher Columbus's second voyage. And you start to say, wow, history is very interconnected. People knew each other. Things happened because this happened. And so when you start looking at the big wide world and not just our country, you start to learn that things are much more complicated.
Complicated yet simplified.
In a way.
Because a lot of these people did know each other.
Of course they did.
And they learned, I always fall back to pirating. Blackbeard wasn't a pirate for all this time. No. He was a privateer.
Captain Kidd.
And Captain Kidd.
Yeah, go down the list.
But you can take Blackbeard, and he got his tutelage from Hornaby,
right,
who was a very staunch British person, and when the war ended, would not take up pirating arms that gave him the chance that he might have to fight with the British. So he didn't do it at all, and just gave his blessing to Blackbeard, and basically gave him the pink slip and the keys to the ship, and said, "Here you go do it with my blessing." So they knew each other, and Hornaby was very, very famous during the Queen Anne's War, and very, very proficient with what he did, that he ended up going back and taking on other honors. So a lot of these people do know each other,
of course,
or come in the same circles.
Right.
I'll give you a really strange example, and this is more personal. I don't know if I've ever introduced you to Santa Teresa rum.
No.
We did a tasting of Santa Teresa rum here with the rum pirate, Jason. Santa Teresa, who became a saint, Santa Teresa lived in Stavely, Spain.
Wow.
At the same time as Pedro Menendez.
Huh.
And she was also she was not fully religious. She was pagan in the naturalistic form of healings.
Wow.
And the Pope thought this was something that kept the women involved in the church, and allowed her to become this person teaching, and then when she died they made her a saint. So the rum company down in South America have used her as their example, or their mascot for their rum, and it's really great rum. But when I got the first bottle of it and found out all this history, so we don't know. I still keep trying to look. We don't know, but Santa Teresa and Pedro Menendez could have actually known each other because it was in the same time frame, within the same dates.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing how history does have
it's
revolving
very circular.
circles.
And Sir Francis Drake, of course, knew Pedro Menendez. Pedro Menendez was supposed to lead the Spanish Armada against Sir Francis Drake, but died 10 days after he got the commission. And so who knows what would have happened.
And I've had good conversations with other historians here in St. Augustine, like Chad Light and a couple, and we talk about, wonder what would have happened.
Oh, wonder what would happen. Who knows?
I mean, there's even...
And Sir Francis Drake was very casual. You've heard the stories.
Yes.
He was bowling in the local bar, waiting for the Spanish Armada to get closer so he could surround them.
Yes, and he also knew the storms were coming too.
Right.
But it really opens up the idea that all these things that happen, history is intertwined. And when you learn one thing, we did December 5th, my son, who's a high school history teacher in Alabama, he came down because, well, he came on the show. His interest is World War II. And he had some very interesting points about World War II and the Japanese being involved and us being involved with it because of the Japanese, and some things a few things that I didn't even know. But were intertwined with the way everything was working here. So history is, and here's a point I was going to make and I forgot, now I'm back to it. It's a nice part about being older, which we both are. You make your character entertaining, and what you said about doing with the children, working with the children, is you make it so that they want to learn. That's how you learn.
I want them to learn history.
Your
so
high
get
school
excited
teacher,
about history.
He took the idea of making it entertaining.
Right.
That's what got you into it. So I've often told people, and many teachers will agree with me, nobody learns anything if they're not having a good time.
I agree. Johnny Carson said the same thing.
If they're not having a good time,
to educate, you need to entertain.
You have to, and that's one of the reasons why your character, either as Flagler or Jesse Fish or Chad doing Ponce de Leon or Pedro Menendez or me just doing a pirate.
Sure.
Those are entertainment
Right.
venues, and one of the things that aids me, and I know you have the same ability, and that's impromptu. Because you never know what, especially children, you never know what they're going to say.
Yeah, it can be challenging.
I mean, I have 3 missing teeth here that happened during COVID. I haven't repaired them yet. I've got 3 missing teeth. I'm worried about it because as a pirate, it doesn't look bad. But once in a while, I'll have a child standing in front of me going, "Don't you ever brush your teeth?"
Wow.
And it's like they're brutally honest.
No.
And I've talked to other teachers. They say they have no couth. That's not it. They have no manners. They just don't have the manners that we have of respect. So I just tell children, yeah, I got in a fight with 4 pirates and I lost 3 teeth. You should see what they lost.
You should see them. Exactly.
You should see them. So so it just, you jump into an improv, and you when you walk into a room as John Stavely. Well, if you do walk in a room with John Stavely, that could be interesting too. But you walk into a room as Henry Flagler, you don't know what's going to be in that room right away.
I have no idea.
So you don't know how they're going to respond to you. You don't know if they're even going to respond to you, or if they're even going to follow along with what you hope will open up your character.
And sometimes that happens. And one of the fun things I like to do is I try to draw them in by doing things like I'll walk up to somebody in the cocktail party and say, "Governor, how have you been? It's so good to see you again." Or I'll walk up to somebody and say, "How's the timber business? Are you doing well?" And so I try to draw them into my world a little bit. And so there are ways to do that, and sometimes they play and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, sometimes they look at you like a deer in headlights.
Right, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it goes to one of the things that when I talk about being an entertainer, first impressions are very important, especially when you're a live character actor and you walk into a room that you have no idea what's going on.
Right.
First impression that they get of you is how you approach the whole situation to begin with. And I've done comedy clubs where they announce that you're the magician and they give you a good line of introduction. You walk out and you hear this.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow.
Wow, here we go.
So your first trick better be really good because you've got to prove something.
Better be.
So as Henry Flagler, your first appearance, your first interaction with anybody is that impression. And you've got to make it. So how long have you been doing Henry Flagler now?
Oh my gosh. 16 years?
Really? 16?
Yeah.
Very good.
And he's developed a lot in that time. I try to be a little bombastic when I walk in. I try to be a little bigger than life. because he was bigger than life if you think about it. He had all kinds of wealth, and he had all the means at his disposal. And I try to play him that way, not being jerky, but here I am. What are we doing? What can I influence? And that's what it was all about. What can I influence? He was very keen, very intellectual. He could figure out what's going to make money, what's not going to make money. And he did very well in his life.
So was he as successful as the Rockefellers?
On the books, no. When Henry passed away, he had about $160 million to his estate.
Wow.
By the time Rockefeller passed away, he had almost $900 million, almost $1 billion.
Wow.
And gave a lot of it away. But Rockefeller continued to press on. He pressed on in the petroleum business. He pressed on in other things, whereas Henry said, hey, I've got these interests. I want to go and play in Florida, and I want to build some hotels.
He remained a board member of Standard Oil, but,
absolutely.
a non-working of Standard Oil. His interests were Florida, the railroad, and turning this state into what it would become. He's the one that, whether you like tourists or not, you can only say...
Well, he truly opened up Florida for it. I would say there'd be no Disney if it weren't for Henry Flagler coming in the 1800s to create this opportunity.
I think I'd have to agree with that, because...
Otherwise, who would come to Florida?
Well, Walt Disney came to Florida, but that was way after. When did Flagler die?
1912.
1912. Mm-hmm. So Disney would have never met him, but at that time frame, he might have known the stories.
Well, Henry Ford was still around, and there were other people, entrepreneurs, that were opening up Florida. One of my favorite stories is about the Jekyll Island Club up in Georgia. They created a hunt club where all these fellows decided to get together. There was 36 members of the original Jekyll Island Hunt Club, and they would meet, and it was the Astors, the Rockefellers, the Flaglers, I mean, all the who's who of that time.
Right.
The Carnegies were there. And those 36 people represented 1/6 of the Earth's wealth. Not just the United States, the entire planet.
Wow.
Those 36 people. And so you begin to understand the influence they had back then. It was tremendous. It's hard to imagine. I mean, you talk about your Elon Musks and your, but they were so much more influential.
And they did it without social media.
Nope.
And telephones, for that matter.
It was shaking hands and kissing babies.
Yeah, it was. It really was. It was one other thing that I often really like to tell people is that was the day when your word is your bond. And if you say you're going to do something, you do it.
You do it.
I'm sure there were some misgivings and shady deals and deals that didn't quite work out in Flagler's life, but in Rockefeller and Edison and Tesla, I mean, they all were in the same circles.
They truly were.
I mean, one of the reasons we have everything the way we have it, electricity, is because the world went towards Edison, because Tesla refused to sell it.
Exactly.
He did not. He wanted the world to have it for free.
Right.
And that
it
didn't
wasn't
set
monetized.
Well.
So
And probably those influencers were
at that
part
time.
of that decision.
Yep, at that time it was very important.
So it's there's some really interesting parts of history, American history especially, since we deal in so much of it, that people just don't understand. Certain things that happened in American history influenced what happens to us now.
Of course.
This town is a tourist town because of Henry Flagler.
Exactly.
So it's a very interesting thing. Is there any one thing you want to tell anybody that's watching what we're doing right now about being a character actor?
Well, you've got to be committed, obviously. It's an actor plus.
I've often thought many of us should be committed, but that's a different story.
Well, true. Playing a part is one thing. You're scripted, you do this, and you say these things, and you interact with other people. But like you said, impromptu becomes the watchword for a character actor. You have to be able to go out and expect the unexpected, be able to respond to people who ask questions you don't expect or anticipate. Bill Barker, who's up in Williamsburg, plays Thomas Jefferson. And that was one of his very, very good skills. He was never caught off guard. And the beauty of playing a Jefferson is there were hundreds of letters that Thomas Jefferson wrote. So you knew his mind. You understood it. A lot of characters, you don't have that ability.
Right.
And so to stand at a cocktail party for an hour or two and not break character and be able to respond to people in the modern times in an old-fashioned way is very challenging. So when people take on a character, you have to commit to it. You have to just say, look, this isn't like playing the theater. This isn't like being in the movies. You have to be more flexible.
Right.
And so what I would say is when you play a character, be more flexible.
I also have one other thing about character actors, and it stems from a disagreement that I had with somebody else that has another pirate attraction in town. And he wanted to have nothing but a whole shipload of named known pirates.
That's hard.
And my excuse to not fall into that trap is the visual excuse is Galaxy Quest. It's a movie.
Right.
But if you pay attention, it is actually a tongue-in-cheek movie making fun of Star Trek and their characters
exactly.
at space cons and comic cons because they know nothing about their characters, but their fans know everything.
Everything.
And if you're going to talk to your fans and don't know anything, then you're going to lose their support.
Right.
And so I guess in a roundabout way, knowing your character, if you're going to do especially a known or famous character, knowing your character to the nth degree is very, very important because there'll be some people that want to come up and trip you.
Absolutely, and that happens.
And you have to be ready for it.
You have to be ready for it. I like composite characters. So when you have composite characters from the time period, they're a bit of this and a bit of that. I think it's much easier.
So if you haven't gotten a word on how things work here in St. Augustine, character actors and tour guides, there's enough work for everyone.
Yes.
There at the Pirate Museum in the Colonial Quarter, we have, over the next 4 months, right around 800 tours coming in.
Yes.
That's at least on the books. Who knows what's going to happen. The children really are fun to drag around through the Pirate Museum, or I'm sure the Colonial Quarter too. I've done a few of the Colonial Quarter. Because they really are, if you can give them that hook, then they are interested.
Yes.
And that's the best part. That truly is. So, Davey.
Yes.
I know you like Jib Jab. Do you have a New Year's Jib Jab?
I do.
I figured as much.
Nice.
All right. That was pretty good. I like that. Very good. I think, Davey, we're just going to have to officially go ahead and say, hey, I think we need a weekly Jib Jab. What do you think?
Oh, I like that.
No, that's what I thought. I knew you would. But that just gives us a good segue into what you always do, and that is your week in history. So pop it up there, mate. things that neither one of us actually knew.
Mm.
It's always nice to learn something new. So as I'm looking at my messages here, let me find my doggone cursor. I've got a new system here, so I'm having problems finding everything. I know it's in there somewhere. There it is, right there. So let's see. We welcome Zachary Harker. He was here in Nightingale in Florida. Thank you for being here with us. Zachary says, I usually make one. This year I haven't put too much thought into it at all. And a New Year's resolution by Nightingale, what did she say? My New Year's resolution is to make them during Lent, a time for reflection. That's a good one. There's a lovely new picture I see of a scene tonight. Okay. Is it the background picture, I guess? Is that what they're talking about? Good. Let's see. I meant on the table in the scene. Oh! Yeah. Does Mr. Longwood recognize that picture?
Aye, Captain, I do.
Yes, very good. It was left here after a party. Donna must have been just too tipsy to remember it. Jay Brusso tried to refer to it as historical interpret. Okay? Aye, absolutely. And Zachary Harker, go back to the Jay Brusso one, the next one down there. Now the next one down, Mr. Longwood. And one more. Perfect. Being that Mayhem is a guide at the Pirate Museum, it's almost a requirement to know the history of the city. Yeah, to a point, you're absolutely right. And Nightingale has talked to Flagler students who have said Flagler College is haunted by Henry Flagler's wives. Have you heard that?
I've heard that.
There's some credence to that because Ida, she was into spiritualism.
She was very much into spiritualism.
So it's
she held
very
seances
possible.
in the ponds.
And did she do those seances where all the great glass is and the...
I don't know where she held them, but they definitely were held.
So let's see. And Jay Brusso, whenever we're doing an event with the Loose Cannon Company, the crew I'm part of, we try to know the history of the city we're in at the time. Yep, that's a very important thing.
Very good.
So many of the pirates come to certain cities and then they don't really know anything about what's going on. Tom Rayner.
Tom Rayner did a beautiful job portraying Henry Flagler, yes.
Donna is part of our crew, and she's a retired school teacher from St. Johns County.
Yes.
So
he was excellent.
Nightingale says she remembers him too. Great video, Davey by Fabworks. How about that? So, ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you're enjoying the show tonight, but it is time to start towards our close. I don't want to make John talk too much here. Besides that, I got at least another shot of rum to share with him. So let's go to the rest of our show. Our treasures on the horizon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, as you can see, we don't have a whole lot right now for January. We do have some tentative plans. I have Adam Morley coming in on the 16th. I'm trying to get Sheriff Hardwick on the 23rd, but it's all dependent on his schedule. We may end up moving him back to February. We'll see what happens. But if you'd like to be a part of the show, as you can see, everything we do with the show, we do history. We talk to people that have a part of St. Augustine's livelihood, and we've had tour guides and character actors and bands and music and everything else, and we like to make sure that everybody is knowledgeable of the fact that we all work together to make St. Augustine a success. That's very important.
Yes.
What's our show's sponsors, Mr. Davey? I remade it for the new year, so it's a little brighter, a little cheerier, and these are our sponsors as it stands right now. We'll be asking for some others soon, and asking these to step up and stay the course. And that would be Shiver Me Pictures, Dick's Wings, Ancient City Sirens, Paper and Strings, our favorite music duo over in the Tampa area, the Colonial Oak Music Park, and of course, as always, St. Augustine Pirate and Treasure Museum. They're our major sponsor for our history video that Davey always does. We thank him for that. Very good. How about our crew support there, Mr.? There it is. Supporting the personnel of the Captain's Quarters podcast. It takes a crew to run a ship. It sure does. W. Mayhem Productions, the crew of the Captain's Quarters, the St. Augustine Swashbucklers, and of course the Powder Monkey. That's our crew. That's where we get all of our talent and our help from. So always be watching, especially for the St. Augustine Swashbucklers. I do want to share with you our charities. Everything that we do from the Captain's Quarters podcast and from the St. Augustine Swashbucklers, all the charity money goes to St. Augustine Youth Services, the Humane Society, and Inc., Investing in Kids. And of course, every Christmas, we do our Toys for Pits drive. And this year, we helped 4 families with approximately 22 children. And we helped a couple of other families that did not have children but had some issues they needed to take care of, and we helped them out. We gave away about $5,700 and toys for 22 children, and it was quite a success. It was a bigger success because after coming off of COVID, everything has been so down. But we're picking up again. And of course, picking up means that we'll be doing some other events, like Old City Pirate Festival the last weekend of January, the 27th and the 28th. We hope everybody will come down. Now, here is the big part, the big one. If you want to help us and have just a small monthly bit pulled out of your credit card to help us out, we have 2 levels of Patreon, the Powder Monkey and the First Mate. We have 12 First Mates, and we have 1 Powder Monkey, and that's just $1 a month as the Powder Monkey pays, and or $5 a month as the First Mate. But here's the big one. The Monday before Christmas, I said I wanted to be over 300. I've been saying I wanted to be over 300 subscribers now since August, because in August we were at about 240. And I thought, we can get 60, no problem. And the week before Christmas, we were at 280 or 290?
290.
290. And look at us now, ladies and gentlemen. 2 weeks later, 370. We jumped up a lot. So we hope that you'll keep supporting us and get those subscribers to come on board. Good job. So there is one other thing that you can go and look at if you want. It is going to be building a little bit at a time right now. It is set to have most of Old City Pirate Fest on it, and that is wmayhemproductions.com. If you go there, you can find out all about Old City Pirate Festival, the schedule, the performers, everything that's going on, and be a part of it. And sponsorship availability is already there. Tickets will be on, if not now, it will be on by midnight tonight, and the vendor pages, so everybody can get involved. And then from now on, we have it every year. It works out well. So go and check us out at wmayhemproductions.com. After Old City Pirate Festival, there'll be a section on the crew, a section on the podcast, and a section on Captain Mayhem and his endeavors over at the Pirate and Treasure Museum. So join us there at wmayhemproductions.com. On that note, Davey, have I missed anything? You're the one keeping track of me.
Yes. If somebody wants to be a guest on the show.
Somebody wants to be a guest. Did you see it in there?
Well, if they want to be, they can.
If they want to be a guest.
Right.
If you want to be a guest, contact us. Send us an email to captainsquarterspodcast21@gmail.com and be a part of our show. If you're the captain of a pirate crew, or the quartermaster of a pirate crew, or you just are part of a pirate crew and you want them to get a little bit of attention, send us some information. We'd gladly bring you on board, whether it's in person or via the internet. You can be a part of everything we do. We have a new pirate crew cropping up here in St. Augustine, and I'm going to contact them and see if I can get them over to talk about their pirate crew here in St. Augustine. And they are attached to the Elks Club. So it'll be an interesting situation for them as pirates, that's for sure. On that note, I can't think of anything else now, Mr. Davey. And as I always say, if we go over the hour, it always means that we have an interesting guest. There you go. All right. So, one last toast as we say our sign-off for everybody. We are into the new year. You have made us all happy here, and we hope that you'll stay with us. And tell your friends, because we love what we're doing, and we make enough sponsorship money to pay the fees. The rest of it, we're just doing because we love it, and that's the best part. We love history, we love our crew, and we love our guests. And before I say the cheer, there is one other thing. Every crew member, or every guest that comes on board, gets one of our $100 friendship chips. That's a good way to put it. It's got our logo on one side, and then it has our sign-off code on the other. It is a $100 black chip that has no $100 value to it. But as a gift, there is a remembrance of you being on board the show.
Thank you so much.
Cheers to you. Take her away, Mr. Davey.
Always a
part of
pleasure.
the podcast.
Part of the crew.
Always a part of all of us. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Bye.